Okay, let's start out with the files that you need to have gotten for this session. These were all in Slack. This is a combination of Chapter 20 and Chapter 21. So you have 4 HTML files that should be added to Aquamaniacs. If you'd like to double check your folders now, Sharks, Whales, Funny Fish, and Groovy Fish. Then you should have added a new fonts folder. In it will be 5 files for the Architect's Daughter font and 5 files for the Sigmar font. See, I have this twice. We're going to ignore that. And added to site style will be 6 graphics folder files, 2 PNG files, and 4 JPEGs. So I'll just quickly go over and show you. So I have this fonts folder now, and all of those files are different extensions. And then the Sigmar, and then in site style, I have all of these graphics. So we're not putting those in page photos, we're putting them in site style. So just pause for a moment if you need to, and make sure you have all of those in the right places. Yeah, ignore this right here. There we go. So those are the files you should have. Okay, so we're going to talk about some new CSS3 features. First one is opacity. This is a new property. We have done some settings for color transparency. We did it on our aquarium picture by making these boxes that have a semi-transparent color in them. I believe we used the Hex Color to do that with. So here's a Hex Color in front of us, light gray. And what we're going to be doing is using something called an alpha channel, which is what we did on this picture. So a Hex Color is essentially the red, green, and blue combination. So the first 2 digits of the hex number are the red, the next 2 are the green, and the last 2 are the blue. So with CSS3, we now have, so this is the RGB color. Instead of the C's, the RGB color would be anything between 0 and 256. So this is 204 in RGB. And we're going to add a 4th value, which will be the alpha channel, and that will tell us how transparent that color will be. And so that's how, here it is converted. And the way we would do that in code is color RGBA and then have all of our values. So let's go take a look at that. This is just an example. You won't have this document. So I've created some boxes here. Hex color, RGB color, and then RGBA. So you can see the RGBA has some transparency set on it. This is what that looks like. So box 1 is just an is a hex color. You can see that right there. Box 2 has the RGB way of doing the color. These are the exact same color. And now I've added the alpha channel, 0.5. And if you remember that, this a little bigger. This value will be anywhere between 0 and 1. So 0.5 is like saying 50%. So that's how I was able to set the transparency of a color only. But what if I use the opacity property, now I can set transparency for everything in that div. Once again, you're going to have a value between 0 and 1.0, and you can see what happens to this image of the little running mouse guy. So 1.0 is like 100%, and it goes down from there. But this happens to the entire div. So on my sample page, I have a div here, make content, and it has a header and a photo and some dummy text. And then I set this background color. Sorry about that. So if I add the opacity property to that content area, and I have a ID set up. So here's my rule for the content area. You can see the entire div got some transparency to it, or is at 50% opacity. So the photo, the header, and the paragraph. So this would be handy if I wanted something to blend into the background or just have a different look to it. So I can apply that opacity to any element that I want, and it'll actually change the entire thing. So let's try it. So you'll see in your Aquamaniacs, there is now a Whales HTML, and that has right here a div called task box, gives an ID, and then every other paragraph is assigned a class: block 1, block 2, block 1, block 2, block 1, block 2. Okay, so we're going to apply some styles to these classes and ID. So you'll need to go to global.css, and I've sent you a copy code file where you'll be able to get the code that you need to complete these activities. There it is, called chapter 21 and 22 copy code. So we're going to copy activity 1, step 1. We're going to put this in our global.css just at the very bottom, under video. Okay, so just put it here at the very bottom. Let's take a look at what that's doing. Right here, notice how it has two selectors, block 1 and block 2. So you can just do that whenever you want to apply the exact same style to more than one element or more than one class in this case. So these are things that block 1 and block 2 have in common. And basically I'm making a box with a border. Let's see if that's what happened. Back to Wales. Okay, so yes, I have a box with a little gray border around each of my little pieces of information about Wales. I should have loaded this in a browser before I applied that rule, just so you could see that it was basically... Just take this back out for a minute. So before we applied that rule, this was just a list. Each paragraph had some information about Wales. So now when we put in these rules, we've kind of got this cool grid going on. Okay. And they're going next to each other because I did float left. And they're only doing 3 in a row because we have set the width of the whole div task box. So I thought that was kind of cool. Now we want to add a little more style. So go back and get the code for step 2, activity 1, step 2. And notice here we are setting some specific rules for block 1 and block 2. So even though this is the things that block 1 and block 2 have in common, now just at the very bottom, I'm going to paste in the things that block 1 and block 2 will have that are unique. So for block 1, I'm setting a specific color and I'm giving it this opacity. Let's get that pasted in at the bottom. Save. Let's go check out what happens. Okay, so it gave us some colors. And you're going to say, wait, I can't see the text anymore. That is what it's supposed to look like. We can argue whether we like it or not, but that is what it's supposed to look like. And you may say, well, that's silly because I can't see any of the text, but now we're going to do something extra. Scroll down in your copy code document to step 3. And notice now we are going to copy and paste in some specific hover events. So things to happen when we hover over each of those squares. So once again, all the way at the very bottom, we will paste in our block 1 hover and block 2 hover rules. Save it. So now, refresh, I should get a hover. Now we've debated whether we actually like the way this looks, but for now we're going to follow the directions. You could certainly, I really like the effect this has. You could certainly change some of the colors. I don't particularly like that I can't see anything here because I'm not sure why I would hover over it if I don't think there's anything there. But I could see where this would be nice if there was a picture there and then I would hover. So I'm not sure what the finished product looks like, so there might be some changes to that in the future. Okay, I'm going to go back to my demo here for a moment. Now, I think we have experienced with the margin property that there's a shortcut. And so there's also a shortcut I wanted to show you guys for the border property. If you're in a CSS file, when you type in border or margin, it automatically pops up this little box that shows you all the shortcuts. I am not in a CSS file right now. I'm doing all the styling in the head. So it's not going to pop up for me at this moment. But we can do a border shortcut, and here's what I have right here. So instead of saying like border top, border side, border bottom, if you just do border, it's going to put a border all the way around. And then this first value is the width of the border. The second value is the style. And the third value is the color. So I've added this border to my box number 1. And you can see I have a double black border around box number 1. We talked last semester about the more specific a rule is, it's the one who gets to be in control. So with this rule here, I have set the border all the way around. If after this one, an order makes a difference, if after this one I say, hey, now I want the bottom border to be blue, then this dashed bottom blue border will override the double black border that I set in the previous rule. So I have it all the way around. I didn't save. There we go. Now I have a blue dashed 10 pixel wide border on the bottom. Yes, I know it's not very pretty, but it makes my example. There's another, I'm just going to delete this. So there's another setting that's new with CSS3, and it's called border radius. So what that does, it basically gives you curved corners. And I think it's easier if I just show you. So I switched the border to just be a plain solid black 2 pixel line. So it's going to be kind of small. And notice that it has a curved edge now. Now, border dash radius gives you a curved edge. I just use pixels to set the border radius, but I can also use a percentage. So let's see what 30% looks like. Doesn't like that space. Okay, it's curved quite a bit more. Notice your text didn't move, so you would need to make some adjustments style-wise to the text if you wanted it to remain within that box. Let's see what it looks like if I change it again. What if it's 50%? Now I have circles, so the higher the percent or the pixels, the greater your radius. I wanted to show you, if I change it back, let's just change it back to 10. If I don't have an actual border set, it doesn't matter. Because border radius is applied to the element itself. So see, I took the border off, but this div has a purple background, so it's still going to show radius. Now, if you didn't have a purple background, technically the element would have a border radius, but you wouldn't really see it because there wouldn't be anything there to show. Another new property is called box shadow. I think you can probably guess what this is going to look like. It's going to create a drop shadow around your element. So the first two values you see here are required. This is the horizontal and vertical direction that I'm going to cast the shadow. So basically, how far down and over from the box I will have a shadow. And there it is. This shadow box right now is white. The default color for your shadow is whatever your text color is. So I set this text to be white, so it gave me a box shadow of white, which I thought was kind of nice. It coordinates it for me. So let's look this up. Box shadow. And see what other properties there are. What other values I can set. So we already just showed what the H and V offset is, horizontal and vertical. Then there's some other settings I could choose. You do not have to set all of these, like I said. So blur, this kind of makes it a softer shadow. Spread makes it increase the size a little bit. And then color, or decrease if you use a negative number. And then color sets the color. And then inset flips where the shadow appears. So let's check some of these out. So if to this box shadow I add a blur value, that's the order it's in, of 5 pixels, and that is set in pixels. You can see it kind of fuzzed it. It kind of blurred the edges. That's kind of a neat effect. I like that. The next value I can set is the spread. So if I set a spread of 5 pixels, I'm going to expect that this will spread out wider in this direction. And that's exactly what it did. If you set the spread to a negative, it makes it less. So I'm not sure. I feel like if I wanted it to be a lot more or a lot less, I would maybe change my box shadow horizontal and vertical settings, but the spread lets you tweak it a little bit, especially when you have like a blur in place. And then we can do a color value. So maybe I pick blue. And if I don't want the white one there, okay. And the last thing I will set is called Inset. And I'm just going to show you that's going to flip where the shadow goes. And here we go. See how it flipped it to be like inside instead of outside? It made the element be inside the shadow instead of the shadow on the outside of the element. So it's just a different look. I don't particularly like that one, so I'm going to take it off. So Inset acts like a toggle. It's either on or off just by putting the word in. So let's see what a couple other box shadows might look like. So here's a red one. If you use a negative number for the horizontal and vertical, it is going to make, there we go. Try again. What's going on? Do I need a space here? There. It is good. If I use a negative value for horizontal and vertical, it is going to make the shadow be on the top of the box. So it's on the outside. So it doesn't do what Inset does, but it puts it on the top instead of the bottom. And then for box 3, I just want to show you, I only set the horizontal, vertical, and the color. If you skip any of the values in the shortcut, it'll just evaluate the ones that you set. So I just have a solid, non-blurred blue box shadow. Now I know I made these nice boxes, but you can put a box shadow around an entire, any element that is a container. So anything that could have a border, like a paragraph or a div, you can set a shadow around the whole thing. So this should put a shadow around the entire main content div, which it did. It's kind of subtle, but maybe you can see it here on the right hand side and then underneath. So let's set a little shadow. I think I'll take this opacity off just so we can see it better. Yeah. And that might be a look you want to go for. In this case, I'm thinking I would actually just like to have a box shadow around this image instead. So I could certainly give the image a ID and do some styling that way. Oops. Or there's still the option to put it in as an inline style. So I decided to do that this time around this image. So let's see what that looks like. Oh yes, I like that. That's nice. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about is custom fonts. Where do you get a custom font? You can get them online or purchase them from a company. You just have to really be careful of your licensing agreement to make sure that it can be used publicly or that you can share it with a lot of other people. Some you have to pay for, some you don't have to pay for, but maybe if it's free, it won't let you use it on a website or won't let you print it. CompuScholar suggests Font Squirrel, and that's where they got the two fonts that we're using for this chapter, Sigmar and Architect's Daughter. Different browsers require different file types, and these are all of them. So if you just have like one of those, then maybe other browsers wouldn't be able to display your font. So Font Squirrel actually generates all 4 files for you. And these are the steps that you would have to go to. So first you have to put all of those font files in your fonts folder, which you've already done. And we should go ahead and include your licensing document too. That way you always know where it is. Then step 2 is to define your font in your CSS file using @fontface, normally done at the top. And then you're going to use the font family property to use this new font, just like we did already last semester. We used the font family property for fonts that were already browser compatible. Okay, so let's try it. So if we take a look at sharks.html, here's what it looks like. These are, because we're going to make some changes to the fonts. So that's what it looks like. So we're going to make this change in our global.css file, like I said, at the very top. So let's go ahead and navigate to the top. And I'm just going to hit enter here so I have some space. All right, then I'm going to go to the copy code document. Go down to activity 2. Oops, I'm sorry. I forgot to try out the border radius for our Aquamaniacs website. So let's back up a minute. If you go ahead and copy the activity 2, code, we're going to go into global.css, not at the top, but you're going to scroll down until you find the main content selector right here, main content rule. So we have a float, a width, and a margin left. We're going to comment out this margin because we're just going to set a different one. I don't know why it doesn't like that. There we go. And we're going to paste that in. So basically, we're going to add this little box. So basically, we're going to add this little box around all of our main content areas, sort of in the background. So if I save that, I can even, let's even look at sharks. We can put like this box around it. If we look at like the home page, it has a little blurred drop shadow. So sorry, I missed that. So go back and try that. We put this new rule in main content. And put a box on all of our main content areas. All of these won't work, by the way. We don't have files for all of these, but okay. Back to custom fonts. So here's what our fonts look like on the Sharks page. So go to the copy code document. Now we're going to copy this font information, activity 3, step 1. It's a big long thing. Here's where we're setting the font, and then we're just using the font here, and I'm just going to let you copy it all at once. We are putting this again at the very top of our global.css. That's where any font specific things should occur. Notice it generated by Font Squirrel. It gives them credit so that you know you have a license agreement for it. This code was generated by them, and then they set the font weight and style. And then here we have a selector with 3 headings. So this is everything that we want that these headings have in common. We're using the font family property that we had used before, and font weight. And then we have a separate rule for each heading so that it has a different color or size. So we'll save that. Go check out Sharks now. There's what it looked like. And now you notice that the heading 1 and heading 2 have different fonts. We also set something for heading 3. I just don't know if there's any heading 3s in that file. But notice we only used the special font for the headings, so the paragraphs don't have it. I'm just looking to see if we have any H3s in here. H1, 2. Yeah, I don't see any H3s right now. So now we've used a custom font. So at this point, I'm going to stop this particular video. What you will do for activity branding Aquamaniacs for the chapter 20 activity is to use some additional custom fonts, adding some border radius and box shadows and things to some of the areas in the website. So you might stop now and go ahead and check that out.